What if the greatest empire of the ancient world could be shaped hour by one person's hunger for attention inside the Colosseum? The roar of 50,000 people is more than noise. It is a physical pressure, a rolling force that seems to shake the stone. The sand in the arena is bright and carefully prepared so every movement can be seen from the highest seats. But the crowd is not studying the ground for long. Their eyes keep lifting toward the imperial box, where a man in purple silk sits above it, all enjoying the certainty that the day belongs to him. This is the Roman Empire, famous for law, engineering, and order. And yet in moments like this, you can sense how fragile order becomes when the ruler treats other people's suffering as something to pass the time. Welcome to Medieval Spirits. If you enjoy calm, story-driven history, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell. It helps these long-form stories reach the viewers who want them. We often think of tyrants as cold and calculating, using fear as a tool of government. But Rome also shows a different danger, one that feels strangely familiar: the bored tyrant. What happens when the most powerful person in the known world has no limits, no real accountability, and too much appetite for spectacle? In this video, we will explore the stories surrounding Rome's most notorious emperors, not to linger on graphic detail, but to understand what absolute power can do to a human mind and what it can do to everyone forced to live under it. The Roman Empire is often celebrated for military conquests, architectural marvels, and cultural influence that reached far beyond its own lifetime. Yet, beneath the grandeur, ancient historians recorded episodes that unsettled them, especially when absolute authority drifted into excess. Some emperors, protected by near-total control, blurred the line between punishment and entertainment, and between public duty and private impulse. Writers like Suetonius, Tacitus, and Cassius Dio left vivid accounts of imperial behavior. But they also wrote with personal opinions, political pressures, and the taste of their own era for dramatic storytelling. So as we explore these reigns, we will keep a careful footing, separating what is likely, what is debated, and what may be exaggerated. The goal is not shock. The goal is to look behind the marble and understand the machinery of spectacle. Among Rome's harshest public spectacles was the practice known as damnatio ad bestias, a punishment in which condemned people were sent into the arena to face wild animals. It could be presented as justice, but it also became public entertainment staged with timing and drama for thousands of spectators. The logistics were immense. Animals were sourced from distant regions of the empire: lions from North Africa, bears from far provinces, and other creatures chosen to impress the crowd with Rome's reach. They were transported in cages, kept under stressful conditions, and released at the moment designed to create the strongest reaction. The condemned often had little protection and little chance. In a society that rewarded displays of power, the arena turned punishment into a message delivered at full volume. Emperor Nero, notorious in later memory, is often linked to intensified public punishments during his reign, particularly after the Great Fire of Rome in AD 64. The city suffered enormous damage, and public anger demanded an explanation. Rumors spread that Nero had ordered the blaze, or at least welcomed it as an opportunity to rebuild on a grand scale for his own projects, including the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. To redirect hostility, Nero's government blamed a small and misunderstood religious group, the early Christians. Tacitus reports that the punishments were severe and designed to make a point. What matters for our understanding is the pattern: a crisis erupts, suspicion rises, and the state chooses a target that can be isolated and presented as the cause. The spectacle becomes a substitute for certainty. These displays took place in arenas like the Colosseum, built to hold immense numbers of spectators and to make authority visible. The amphitheater created a hierarchy of sight: the emperor above, the crowd around, and the condemned at the center. In that setting, punishment was not only a sentence, it was a performance of power, and the crowd became part of the ritual. Ancient writers also suggest that for Nero, the public arena was sometimes not enough, and that displays of dominance could spill into private settings where guests were expected to admire imperial generosity. Some accounts describe a night in imperial gardens where suffering was used as lighting in theater. Modern historians debate details and emphasize caution, but the larger point stands clearly when a ruler turns punishment into entertainment. Cruelty becomes normalized, and the line between law and whim grows dangerously thin. Gladiatorial combat was already a major Roman attraction, but under certain emperors it became more personal and more unsettling. In theory, the arena displayed courage, discipline, and a kind of martial virtue that Romans admired. Yet Emperor Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius, is portrayed by ancient writers as turning the games into a stage for his own ego. Commodus did not want to be merely the sponsor of the show. He wanted to be the center of it, stepping into the spotlight and demanding recognition as if he were a heroic figure. Cassius Dio writes about watching these events from the senator's section with a mix of anxiety and disbelief. Commodus compared himself to Hercules, wearing symbolic costume and carrying props that announced his fantasy to the entire city. The arena in these stories became less about tradition and more about the ruler's self-image. However, these contests were rarely fair in the way a true sporting event might be. A professional gladiator trained for years, living within a brutal system, but still relying on skill, timing, and resilience. Commodus trained under protection, practicing in controlled settings against opponents who understood the risk of displeasing him. When he appeared in the Colosseum, the outcome could not be allowed to surprise. Ancient sources claim matchups were arranged, so the emperor would look dominant, and that opponents were disadvantaged in ways large and small. In that environment, the arena stopped being a test of courage and became a political ritual. The crowd was invited to applaud a victory, but everyone in the elite knew the deeper reality when the emperor enters the arena. The rules exist to protect the emperor, not the sport. Commodus also extended his performances to animal hunts, presenting himself as a master of nature as well as men. Writers describe a protected gallery from which he could strike animals while remaining safe, turning danger into controlled demonstration. One famous anecdote involves an ostrich and a theatrical gesture aimed at the senators, a moment meant to look playful while carrying a warning underneath. The message, as Cassius Dio implies, did not need words. The emperor's mood could decide your future. Whether every detail is precise or partly colored by political hostility, the broader picture is consistent. Under Commodus, spectacle became intimidation with applause. Even laughter had to be managed. And when an entire ruling class learns to control its face in public, you are no longer watching entertainment. You are watching fear behave politely. For some emperors, the suffering of others was not only a function of law, but also a way to display dominance, and ancient writers often place Caligula in this category. Caligula, remembered as one of Rome's most infamous rulers, is described as turning executions into extended public events where punishment and spectacle blended together. The stories paint him as impulsive, theatrical, and severe, using shock as a tool to keep everyone uncertain. Unlike Commodus, who wanted applause for his heroism, Caligula is portrayed as wanting something colder, the feeling of control itself. A famous line attributed to him, wishing the Roman people had a single neck, survives because it captures the spirit of these accounts. Whether the quote is exact or polished by retelling it reflects how Romans later tried to describe a ruler who treated life and death as proof of his position. Suetonius and other sources claim that Caligula ordered mass punishments and required the public to watch, treating the crowd as part of the performance. In these narratives, people could not leave early, and discomfort became part of the control. The heat of the day, the length of the event, and the pressure to remain attentive are described as if the emperor wanted everyone to feel trapped inside his will. When there were not enough condemned criminals, some accounts claim he expanded the net, turning the spectacle into a reminder that safety could be temporary and conditional. The point was not simply punishment. The point was the emperor's ability to decide what counts as punishment in the first place. In a system like that, law becomes theater and theater becomes the law. Caligula is also portrayed as someone who prolonged punishments to heighten fear, not simply to enforce order. A phrase attributed to him urging executioners to strike in a way that made the victim fully aware appears in later retellings because it suggests fascination with control rather than justice. Ancient writers describe him eating and socializing while punishments unfolded nearby as if cruelty were ordinary background to his life, and they present this as moral collapse at the top of the state. Modern historians debate the reliability of specific scenes, noting that hostile sources can sharpen the worst stories. But even with caution, the political lesson remains when a ruler enjoys fear as entertainment institutions weaken. People stop acting as citizens and start acting as survivors, measuring every word, every facial expression, every moment of attention. Sexual exploitation is another theme attached to imperial excess in ancient sources, and it requires careful language today. Tiberius, the successor of Augustus, withdrew to the island of Capri in his later years, leaving much daily administration to trusted subordinates. Capri became a symbol in Roman storytelling, a remote fortress of privacy where rumor could grow unchecked, and where the emperor could live far from public scrutiny. Suetonius in particular records disturbing allegations about coercion and exploitation within the emperor's household, including claims involving the vulnerable and the young. These accounts are among the most sensational in Roman literature, and modern historians often approach them carefully. Still, they persist because they describe a timeless risk. When a ruler lives behind walls, power can become personal and private life can be weaponized. One notorious cluster of stories describes Tiberius surrounding himself with people trained to satisfy his appetites and amusements, turning private life into performance. Ancient authors use vivid labels and scandalous scenes portraying a world where consent and dignity mattered less than obedience. Rather than repeating explicit imagery, it is enough to name the core accusation that an emperor used his position to violate boundaries, and that secrecy protected the behavior. The isolation of Capri in these stories does not simply hide the ruler. It reshapes the court around him. When everyone's safety depends on pleasing one person's, silence becomes a form of survival, and the most powerful protection is the ability to look away. That perhaps is the most chilling detail of all, because it requires no theatrical scene to be understood. Ancient writers do not limit such accusations to Tiberius. They also depict emperors like Caligula and Nero as treating people as possessions, using humiliation as a political tool and forcing elites to applaud what they privately condemned. One famous story claims Nero compelled a young person to take the public role of a spouse, turning personal identity into spectacle and control. Other anecdotes describe Caligula insulting senators by humiliating their families at dinners, as if social shame could be used to break political resistance. Because these stories can be exaggerated, it is wise to keep a historian's caution. But the pattern they describe is plausible and important in autocratic systems. Domination does not stop at laws and taxes. It can enter homes, reputations, and bodies, and it can be enforced not only by soldiers, but by fear of humiliation. Some Roman emperors were infamous for extravagant parties where luxury was meant to impress and where the guest list could feel more like an obligation than an honor. These were not casual dinners. Ancient sources describe them as long, carefully staged events that tested endurance and loyalty as much as appetite. Nero, often portrayed as a lover of excess, hosted banquets that displayed wealth and demanded admiration, as if the room itself existed to reflect his greatness. He built the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a palace complex that stunned visitors with its scale and decoration. Beauty was part of the message. The emperor's taste was supposed to look like destiny, and the guests were expected to respond as if they were grateful to witness it. Suetonius paints scenes of Nero seated at the head of the table, watching guests consume exotic foods, overindulge in wine, and take part in behavior meant to entertain the ruler. The pressure was social and political. People were expected to laugh, applaud, and show enthusiasm even when exhausted or uncomfortable. Some accounts claim doors were locked, or departure was discouraged, creating the feeling that the emperor's celebration could not be escaped without risk. Nero's long performances with music are also described as part of the ordeal because to look bored, to drift off, or to stop clapping could be interpreted as disrespect. In that world, entertainment becomes surveillance. A banquet becomes a stage where every guest is an actor, and the emperor is both the star and the judge. Caligula, similarly, is described as using feasts to unsettle his guests, mixing generosity with threats in a way that kept everyone off balance. Ancient writers claim he would toast a person's health and then casually mention how quickly their life could be ended, as if reminding the room of the true power at the table. Stories of wasteful displays like serving food covered in gold leaf are presented as symbols of contempt for ordinary limits and a desire to prove he could squander what others needed. These parties in the sources are not only about indulgence, they are about dominance in social form. The most unsettling detail is not a single act, but the atmosphere, everyone smiling, because they must everyone guessing the emperor's mood, everyone hoping the next joke is not aimed at them. The Roman Colosseum also hosted staged hunts of exotic animals known as venations, and ancient writers described them as some of the most dramatic spectacles of the era. These were not simple hunts in open countryside. They were large choreographed events in which rare creatures were brought from distant regions, lions, tigers, elephants, bears, and more, and displayed before a crowd eager for surprise and scale. The purpose was partly entertainment and partly propaganda. By gathering the empire's farthest wonders into one arena, Rome demonstrated its reach across continents. For the audience, the message was clear and thrilling: the world is wide, and Rome can bring it here. Yet, beneath that thrill was a darker truth about consumption control and the cost of turning nature into a public show. Commodus is frequently portrayed as especially fond of these events, preferring the controlled environment of the arena over the uncertainty of the wild. He presented himself as a skilled hunter, using specialized weapons and carefully arranged conditions that ensured he appeared fearless while remaining protected. Writers describe him showing off marksmanship and turning the hunt into a personal showcase, with the crowd expected to admire his performance as much as the animals themselves. Cassius Dio even records astonishing numbers for animals killed in a single day, although modern readers should treat exact totals cautiously. The key point is not the scorekeeping. The key point is the purpose. This was a ruler using the most visible stage in Rome to say, "I can do what I want, and you will cheer." These hunts also carried symbolic meaning. Animals captured from distant lands represented those lands, and the act of displaying and killing them suggested dominance over provinces and nature alike. To kill an elephant could be read as conquering Africa, to kill a tiger as mastering the East, a blunt visual language easily understood by the audience. For emperors remembered as cruel, this symbolism merged with a taste for endless demonstration, where the point was not sport but power. Ancient writers describe the arena changing over the course of the day, excitement rising, boredom returning, the show escalating as if the crowd needed ever larger proof that the empire was still strong. Even without graphic detail, the meaning is unsettling. When a society treats domination as entertainment, empathy can erode quietly, and the demand for spectacle becomes a hunger that is never fully satisfied. The reigns of these notorious Roman emperors offer a lasting warning about what can happen when absolute power is placed in the hands of rulers who crave excitement, applause, or control for its own sake. Their decisions left behind fear, instability, and a political culture where performance could matter more than justice. Ancient accounts describe sudden violent ends for several of them. Caligula was assassinated by members of his own guard in a palace passageway. Nero died as his support collapsed, remembered by tradition for the dramatic line, "What an artist dies in me." Commodus was killed in a palace conspiracy after enemies concluded he could no longer be managed. Their endings were not peaceful retirements. They were the kind of abrupt conclusions that often follow a life lived without limits. But we still have to ask why Rome endured such rulers at all. Why did the Senate and the people tolerate the madness described in these stories? Part of the answer lies in the seduction of spectacle and the politics of distraction. Emperors offered bread and games, and in a crowded city, those gifts mattered. Spectacle also created distance. If someone else was the target, you could feel safer for a moment, grateful the spotlight had not turned toward you. Over time, that feeling can become habit, and habit can become acceptance. The crowd learns to clap because clapping is safe. The Senate learns to smile because smiling is survival. And the emperor learns that fear can be managed the same way a show is managed with timing, surprise, and a stage. Yet it is essential to remember that Rome was not defined only by its worst rulers. Some emperors tried to govern with restraint and some actively disliked excess. Marcus Aurelius is often described as disapproving of brutal entertainments and focusing on duty. Hadrian is remembered for travel, construction, and administration across the empire, leaving behind walls, cities, and reforms rather than scandal. But the extreme stories linger because they hold up a dark mirror to human nature, showing what can happen when empathy is removed and limits disappear. If you are eager to learn more about ancient history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell for more stories with medieval spirits. The crowds are gone, and the arena is silent, but the stones remain, still asking the same question: who should be trusted with unchecked power?